This is Guy Montag, and welcome to my Draw My Life. My story isn't your average tale of happiness. In fact, it's rather about fire, destruction, and change. But like everyone, my life started out so simple. I was born into a world glowing with screens and constant noise. I don't recall much of the earliest days, except the memory of the parlor walls glowing everywhere, brightly colored and loud. My parents used to sit and watch their family upon those screens hour after hour, and they hardly spoke anything to me. But I grew up thinking it was normal. Those screens talked to themselves. It was later, looking back, much later, that I think the glow was the first thing which shaped me. It was comforting at first, but it also made everything feel fake. Like nothing real ever happened in my house. But I didn't know any better. I was just a kid. When I was a young boy, nothing was more admirable than to be a fireman, for they were considered heroes who protect society, yet not save anyone. At least that's how everyone described it. I can remember running with my friends, our toy helmets on, pretending to burn piles of imaginary books. We laughed and shouted, "Burn the bad ideas, keep the peace." It was all so exciting at the time. We didn't know what we were pretending to destroy. We only knew books were dangerous and firemen were the good guys. It astonishes me now to think how we took it. Just part of the way things are. Nobody doubted anything. None of us at school, none of us at home, none of us in the street. If the firemen say books are bad, then they're bad, aren't they? Nothing really changed as I grew older. At school too, it was all about learning rules and memorizing facts. We were never taught to ask questions or think critically. As a matter of fact, questioning was not encouraged. Things teachers would say would be like, "Don't waste time thinking. It only makes you unhappy." And we all believed it. I recall sitting in class, staring out of the window, and wondering if this was all there was to life. The teacher would be talking about how books cause confusion and war and how firemen protect everybody by burning them. I wasn't sure I believed it, but I never said anything. You didn't want to get in trouble thinking too much. It wasn't just school, though. The whole world seemed the same. People didn't talk about real things. They just repeated what the parlor screens told them. I think that's when I started to feel restless, like something was missing, but I didn't really know what it was yet. By the time I graduated, I was ready to become a fireman. It felt like the most natural thing in the world. After all, firemen were strong, respected, and powerful. They kept society safe from the chaos of ideas. I remember the first day of wearing a fireman costume. He reached out to shake my hand and said, "Welcome to Brotherhood, Montag." I remember this very well, and of course, with pride like belonging is the name it goes under. The world itself was exhilarating. The roar of flames and the smell of kerosene, it was intoxicating. I remember standing in front of burning houses, watching books disintegrate into ash and thinking, I'm doing something important. I'm making the world better. At least that's what I told myself. Shortly after, I became a fireman. I also got married. Mildred and I thought we'd be happy, have a normal life, which we did for a while, or at least it seemed. Mildred loved the walls in the parlor. She'd sit there all day and look at her family up on the screens and laugh at what they said, and then repeat conversations back like it was a real thing. And then she'd always have those little tiny seashell radios plugged in her ears and turned way up so she'd never have to hear you anyway. So you felt alone even when you were together. I remember once trying to talk to her, to tell her a little of what was going on in my mind. She even laughed and said, "Don't think so much, Guy, just relax." It was like she didn't even see me anymore. After that, I ceased trying to reach her. It would honestly be pointless. Then, one night, everything changed. I met Clarice. She was my neighbor, and she was a 17-year-old girl who had a whole different way of looking at the world, not fixated on the parlor walls and asking questions. She would talk about stuff like how the grass smelled in the morning and how the stars looked at night. I remember she asked me, "Are you happy?" I didn't know how to answer her. No one had ever asked me that before. Her question stayed with me long after our conversation ended. It was like she planted this tiny seed of doubt in my mind and I couldn't ignore it. It was Clarice who made me realize that I wasn't happy. I was just existing. And for the first time, I started to wonder why. It wasn't long after meeting Clarice that I had my first real turning point. One night, my crew and I burned a house filled with books. The woman who lived there refused to leave. She chose to die with her books instead. I'll never forget how serene she looked. Standing there in the fire with the books around her, it really shook me to the core. I remember thinking, what could be so important in those pages that someone would die for them? That night, I stole my first book. Just one. Hid it under my jacket and told myself it didn't mean anything, but in my bones, I knew it did. That book changed everything. And after that, I couldn't stop. I started stealing books from every house we burned. I'd hide them at home and read them late at night when no one was around. I didn't understand much of what I read, but I couldn't stop. It felt like those pages were full of answers I'd been searching for my whole life. When Mildred found out, she lost it. She screamed at me, told me to burn the books before they ruined us. She said I was crazy and I'd get us both killed, but I couldn't go back. I didn't care about the rules anymore. Eventually, it all came crashing down. Mildred betrayed me. She called the firemen and Captain Beatty, made me burn my own house. I'll never forget watching the flames destroy everything I built. It was like my old life was being erased. When Beatty leaned on me too hard once, I killed him. I didn't mean to, it just happened. And then I ran. The mechanical hound chased me down the street, its metal legs clattering on the asphalt, a needle full of death, an inch from my carotid artery. I've never been so scared in my entire life. I followed the river out. I remember getting in the water, letting the water take me downstream. The first time that I ever felt free. I looked up at those stars and felt very little compared to all of the immense universe. Very humbling and yet almost hopeful. Now, I'm with a group of people who memorize books. We believe that one day the world will need stories again. Fire used to destroy everything in my life, but now it's a symbol of warmth and rebuilding. I don't know what's next, but I know one thing. Books matter. Ideas matter. And I'm going to make sure that they're never forgotten. This was my Draw My Life. There's one thing I've learned. It's this. The future belongs to those who think, question, and dream. Don't ever stop.